Hello, ladies. Welcome to the third day of the Wounds to Wings Summit 2022. God willing, this is the first and not the last year of the summit. God willing, we are growing this and we make it bigger and brighter, and we awaken even more the goddess, because I see her everywhere. I see it on you. You will say, oh, here we are few women here watching live, but I am looking at the statistics behind, and women are really active. You know, what we have is that we're slightly shy and yeah, slightly shy, not that outspoken, but there are many women in the conference. And I'm really excited. Some of them are sending me messages, private messages, voice messages, text messages, and they send the love to all of you, the speakers, and to all the participants. We will grow the community. We will grow the conference. So I'm really excited. We are pioneering here. So today we have a dear friend of mine who is now already in the audience, but I want to play our conversation that we have a couple of days or weeks ago. Is a dear friend of mine for years, and she talks about the heroine's journey in a very personal way, personal and powerful way. So fasten your seatbelts, get pen and pencil, and write as much as you can. Please also, if you find a phrase that catches you, please type it in the chat, because it's really powerful to share it among all of us. So here we go. Let me press button. Let's listen to our dear Susanna Liller.
Hi, ladies. Now is the turn of a really good friend of mine. And I dare to say that because we know each other for, oh my God, I think it's 15 years now, 12 years, something like that. No, 15 years, 15 years. Oh my God. It's time passes when you are having fun. Susanna is an amazing woman. She's a heroine, and she takes the subject of the heroine to a higher level. And this is what we're going to be talking about today with her. For years, she helped organizations work through conflict, as well as inspire their employees to see a path for their better selves as an organizational development consultant and executive coach. Eventually, she heard her inner voice, calling her to use this experience and skill set in a more personal and fulfilling way. Susanna published the award-winning You Are a Heroine, a retelling of the hero's journey, with a message for all women to wake up to their heroism. Yeah, that's you, ladies. Susanna believes every woman has had moments in her life that qualify as heroic. Today, Susanna's online course, blog, podcast, social community, and workshops touch thousands of women ready to hear their calling and take a leap towards the life they want to live. Susanna, I am so excited to have you today with us. Thank you for accepting the invitation.
Oh, Blanca, how wonderful to be here with you. Yes, thank you very much for including me in this stellar group of women that you have assembled here. It's amazing.
So exciting. So exciting.
Me too.
I know that your life has gone through ups and downs and moments of cocooning and self-reinvention. And maybe to tell us all of them is maybe too much, but I really like this story of how the last transition, how you move from organizational development consultant and executive coach to the heroine's journey. How did that happen? What happened within or without? I don't know.
Well, and as you read introducing me, it's always about listening to that inner voice. And sometimes I can hear it clearly, and sometimes it's got to keep nudging me. And that transition, I needed a lot of nudging, because I'm sure this has happened to you and other people listening. We get in our comfort zone. And for me, that was being an organizational development consultant. Even though it was challenging working with people in conflict, I was doing it for about 25 years and it felt good and I knew I was helping people. But all along, my passion, and my husband would call it my hobby, was helping women and helping women with empowerment. And I would offer workshops and on the side, still doing the consulting work. And I always thought eventually I'll do fully the workshops with women, but I just couldn't let go of the business of consulting. And I think that I know it is because of the coaching I've done with women. You think to yourself, you're like hovering over a threshold of making the leap into a different course. And you're thinking, I'll never make as much money. I'll lose my credibility. Who do I think I can do that? All those questions. But I finally did it. And what helped me do it was a couple things. I got a coach, and my coach, Jake Ballantyne, said to me, Susanna, it's like you're dragging a chair around behind you. You need to just make the leap. The chair is holding you back. I know. He actually got up and started dragging a chair around. And that visual was, oh my gosh, that is what I'm doing. And it's time. So I did it. And going to Hudson, the coaching school with you, that there were so many things that paved the way, but ultimately was, if not now, then when, Susanna? So I dived into it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I don't know if you know this visual or the audience will know this visual. You make me think about the movie of The Mission. When there is a story of the Jesuits going to, I think it's the Amazon, and going into a very, very selvatic region. And to get there, to get to the mission, the physical building, they needed to go up a waterfall. And one of these men used to be a soldier. So his chair was a big bunch of metal swords and shields. And I found it so perfect because it's like the mission is there. And you think that to go there, you need something to defend yourself. Right. And then you're climbing. So he's climbing in the movie with a lot of trouble. And he almost dies many times because of the weight.
Yeah.
Until he let go.
And it was 100% about letting go. And that makes you lighter and you can go up to the top of the waterfall, right? It's just, it's an interesting process. And that's, to me, that's what makes us heroines, when we accept the call from within and hear that inner voice and answer it and make that leap. As scary and impossible as it might be, we do it. And that is what evolves us, right? It grows and develops us.
So you were called to help women already for years. We were studying coaching in Hudson together. We were talking about female leadership 15 years ago. And a female leadership so much. And you chose this subject of the heroine's journey, which is fascinating.
Wow.
Did it find you? Or did you find it? How did that come?
Oh my gosh. So you and I went through part of Hudson together, but not the whole thing. And when, as you know, when you're in the course, you have to come up with a paper and a presentation about how you're going to use coaching. And it was kind of in the middle of the year. I had a couple months still, and I hadn't come up with my topic. And I was struggling with that. And it some point, a friend of mine said, Susanna, you need to go to Camden, Maine. I live in Maine, and Camden is a beautiful spot. And hear this woman talk about the hero's journey. And it was like, it's hot out there. It's the middle of the summer. Camden, I'd have to get on Route 1 with all the traffic. I don't want to do that. But my inner voice was like knocking. This is go, just do it. So I got in the car and I went. And that's when it found me. My world exploded. This woman, and here we are in this air-conditioned basement of the Camden Library, and the woman is explaining what the hero's journey is. And of course, it has always been mostly the hero's journey because Joseph Campbell sort of introduced the concept to the world. And so she was explaining how the Wizard of Oz and Dorothy's journey illustrates the hero's journey. And my work, I was always talking about Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and in fact called that company that I started, the Women's Empowerment Company, Ruby Slippers, because what I always explain to women, the ruby slippers is our internal GPS. Our intuition can always, like the slippers she wore, get us to where we want to go. At any rate, this woman explained the significance of her trip to Oz and what happened there in the context of this larger framework, the hero's journey. And for me, it was like, this is my model. This is my coaching model. All women have to know this because they are on the hero's journey. But I quickly had to say, excuse me, women need to be able to relate to this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's the heroine's journey. And what's interesting, Blanca, is that more and more, there's a book that just came out this year, the beginning of this year, by Maria Tatar. I had to pull it out of my, The Heroine with 1,001 Faces, where our friend Joseph Campbell, many years ago, it was all the hero. And, you know, all his examples, and both of them use literature to explain this pattern, archetypal, ancient pattern of how a human being evolves. It's been in literature for thousands of years, and both of them talk about it. He talks about it with all the male examples. She brings us the female examples, which other people have done too, but it's just so interesting. I think more and more, as the sacred feminine emerges more in the world, we're going to hear more about this.
Oh, wow. I get the goosebumps so much when you speak about this. It's so, so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know, the way I think of ourselves is that we are goddesses with amnesia.
Yes.
And we really need to remember who we are.
Right.
Really remember who we are.
Right. Right.
Not that we don't need to be changed, modified, or improved, or empowered. It's just a matter of remembering.
Right. It's, you know, the story about the fish swimming in the water, and two older fish come by and say, how's the water? And the younger fish, what water? And to me, it's like we are swimming in this greatness, but for whatever reason, we've always tamped it down. We've always, you know, it's easier for us to say, oh no, she's a heroine or she's a heroine, not accepting it.
Oh God, this is exactly every Thursday I meet my group, my coaching group, and one of the women said, I was about to think, I am so lucky to be here where I am for being who I am, for being the person I am, you know, like belittling herself.
Yes.
So that got us in an entire conversation that
right.
We should say, yeah, it is precisely for people like me.
Yeah.
But we should, you know, say it with the lungs full of oxygen. I'm really proud that is women, people like we.
Yeah.
It's so important.
I think we're on the edge of another threshold of being able to do that as women. And when you think being able to accept our greatness, our, you know, to be able to be more, feel that empowerment. And I think back 100 years ago when women weren't able to vote. And even before then, they weren't even thinking about it, that that was a possibility. And you kind of can see how that maybe that's similar to where we are now. What, me great, me a heroine? Yeah, you know, and so what I like to do is show them these are the steps of the heroine's journey. And the big step is listening to that call, and then, as scary as it might be, leaving a business behind or whatever it is you have to let go of, if or going into, that takes so much courage because you're going into the unknown. And so that's a heroic endeavor. It doesn't mean you have to behead a dragon or all the things that we think are heroic. Just going into the unknown in whatever that is for you is heroic.
And this is where we are right now, historically, as before we press the button of recording, we were talking pandemic, wars, and there are personal issues, divorces, bankruptcies, people laid off. We are in this in-between space, in this, the moment of being called.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can we, because there is the refusal of the call.
It is.
How can we notice that we are called and that maybe we are refusing it? How can we notice that we are pulling this chair, that the attachment, because sometimes the attachment is so attached to us.
That we don't even, like the fish in the water, it's just, we don't even know where we are. And to me, and I bet this happens for many people, if I'm getting a call to do something, it doesn't leave me. It just, I can even put it behind me for a couple of years, but then it will come back. And I guess, I don't know if this, I have a couple examples, but one is when I had to divorce my first husband. And I probably refused that call for 13 years until it just, I knew I had to do it, but I was so afraid. And to me, fear often is what keeps us in refusal. But if also you can get help. And so what I did, and it's silly to think about it, and it was quite a while ago, it was over 30 years ago for me, but my first step out was to go to a therapist, and I had never been to a therapist before. And I was ashamed to go to a therapist because to me, in my mind at that time, it was admitting I had made a mistake and there was something wrong with me. But I took that step and my world began to open up as to the possibilities. It's sometimes I think it's like, you know, it's like a kaleidoscope that from a certain point on the path, you can only see this much, but then you take a step and then you can see more. And that was my way slowly out. And in the chair example, I said, okay, well, I'm a coach, but I need help here. I don't know what I had written my book as well, and I didn't know what my next step was. I should get a coach, you know, so getting help is a big way to get rid of the chair, know that you're carrying a chair. Because
it's so big, this is so big. When we do not, when we try to be stoic and do it by ourselves, we are not really being a stoic. We are like, how's the quote, is not asking for help is not giving up. Asking for help is not giving up, is refusing to give up. Yeah. And I have the same pattern in my life. Whenever I went and got a coach or a therapist or went to a retreat, things happen.
Right.
It's so important.
Right, right. And so I feel compelled to say, not only in my mind is it important to think help in the form of what we can see, but also spiritual help, whatever that is for you, to know that you can ask for help from the universe or a spiritual guide. Wayne Dyer had a thing he'd say, it's like choosing to turn on the light switch in a dark room. You don't have to turn it on, but asking for spiritual help is like turning on that switch and having more light to guide you on your journey.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. It is so important, ladies. So if you're feeling these these feelings that you are called to the unknown, just go for help. You know what you're saying reminds me the Skill Helper, wonderful book that we both read in Hudson. There was a quote there that forever stuck with me. Help helps. And it doesn't matter if he's a girlfriend or a psychiatrist or a priest or a rabbi or a tree. Trees help me a lot, but it helps. So I guess this is the refusal of the call and taking the call. And we take the call and then we enter into the unknown.
Right.
There is a lot to talk about it, but if you can give us an introduction of what happens in the heroine's journey after we take the call.
So if I were to talk about it at a high level, and you kind of, when you were asking me a question, you said you've had your ups and downs, Susie, and that's what happens. I mean, you're out there on this new journey. Maybe it's a new job for you, or maybe you've moved, or some big change in your life. And there are ups and downs. Good things happen, bad things happen. You meet people that help you, and you meet people that don't so much help you. And there are blind alleys and wrong turns, and you have to navigate it. And I'm the one who's always saying that's where your intuition, your internal ruby slippers will always help you. You can end up in something that we call the belly of the whale. And that's based on an old story that Jonah was swallowed by a whale. And it's to me, for the journey language and understanding, it's when you get those moments when you're turned upside down, that the rug is pulled out right from underneath you. And an example for me was I've had many leaps in my life, and I had left a big corporation with another woman going into partnership in a business. And about 6 months in, she said, I don't want to be your partner anymore. And that was, oh my gosh, disaster. And it ended up being so good for me because I did it on my own and proved something to myself. But that was a belly of the whale moment. And when you think about it, that's how change happens. Because if life just leaves us alone, we tend to just, okay, we're good. But if we're picked up and shaken and turned upside down, then it forces us to see things differently. And so you want those belly of the whale moments. And another thing that happens is you meet dragons on the journey as you're out there on the road of adventure. And the dragons are those deep-seated fears that maybe we've had as children. And one of mine I always talk about was, I can't do it by myself. I had very protective parents. And so journeys will bring up those old things that are helpful and necessary for us to look at. So all kinds of things happen, but it's all about evolving us and transforming us, which is why, to your point, listen for those calls and take them as ominous, or you might think them are challenging. Joseph Campbell's quote is, if you take one step toward the gods, they will take 10 steps towards you. You will get help.
I didn't know this quote. It's beautiful. They always, the thing that I heard several times is that you have to meet God in between. And all these jokes, no, that God saved me. And there's the person who comes and save you and you say no. And the person comes and save you and you say no. And you go to heaven. And God, why didn't you save me? Well, I sent you several people and you never listen. But I love your quote because it's not meeting God in the middle. It's just taking a little step.
Right, right.
And God will do 10 times what you do.
Right.
It's
right.
so powerful.
And it's so much about believing in yourself. So when that voice keeps speaking to you, do this, leave the marriage, and it's finally, you have to believe that you're getting this inner guidance and to follow it. And then it gets stronger. The more you follow it, your intuition grows even more.
Yeah. I think that these historical moments are calling us, all humans, to develop the quality of discernment. But possibly even for women more, because we have been hidden and we have been forgotten, and or the the quality of the feminine has been hidden, forgotten. How can we improve our discernment when we are in that moment? Moments, I think discernment is very useful in these three moments of the call, of the belly of the whale, of the when you find the dragon. How can you improve your discernment, your decision making under uncertainty?
So that's a big question. And what I do to help people with that, and myself, is one thing I do, and I'm sure so many people listening do the same thing, is I journal. And I journal in the format of Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way, which is a stream of consciousness journaling to see what comes up to get guidance. I also am a follower of people that use the non-dominant hand as a way to connect with your inner knowing and your intuition, to see what does my non-dominant hand have to tell me. And that's Lucia Capaccioni wrote a book, The Power of Your Non-Dominant Hand. These are all things that I do in my workshop with women that I coach. And I did so much strategic planning. I have a way to do strategic planning using your intuition to discern what's next. So the navigating, you're right. I mean, it is hard to discern. And how do you know it's your voice and what you should do and not what the world is telling you to do? And I think it's about having practices that help you go within, have a meditation practice, have a journaling practice, so you get used to hearing another voice other than what your mother used to tell you or whatever, it's something you develop over time.
Yeah, it's really a gym. It's really a gym. I really love it. It is a series of practices to listen to yourself. We have learned to be disconnected from ourselves, and it's time to change that. It's absolutely time to change that.
But I think also, Blanca, what you're doing with your group of women, I mean, that kind of connecting with like-minded souls, so that when you say something, someone is, yes, they resonate with it. So you feel like you're not alone, and you know that there are other people similar to you that can give you guidance and help you and support you on your way. I think women supporting women is very important right now. Very important.
Yeah, this is a big one because oh God, look, my mother was really difficult, and she was a schizophrenic, so it was difficult in a big serious way. Because of that, she pushed us, or even my sister and me, to be separate, to fight against each other. Then I was in a school just of girls school. Whew, so much verbal violence, gossip, innuendo, bullying. So I grew up being afraid of women. And many of my customers tell me, I am afraid of women. And with my work, I've been learning myself to love my sister, to love my mother, to love other women. But I must tell you that there is, I call it the 100 blankets inside. Some of my blankets are still afraid of women. What would be your, I don't know, a question or a practice or a perspective that could help us to conquer this fear and go more into sisterhood?
Because I think what you're talking about, I think that women, we do have a tendency to compare, right? And then if you're comparing with, oh, I'm not as pretty as she is or as smart as she is, I need to show her by being, I mean, it's that whole comparing thing, right? And yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, don't compare, be authentic, you know, you need to be yourself, but it's hard to do that when, particularly if you're being attacked and bullied. So boy, advice would be to learn how to love yourself and love yourself even more. And to me, where that might be useful, so just in doing more things online and having to look at myself and video myself, initially when I did that, it was like I couldn't bear to look at it. And what I've realized is, Susanna, in not loving you, you're not helping yourself or helping anybody else. In other words, that child is still inside of you. How you treat yourself is how you treat others. We just have to learn how to treat ourselves better. And I think if we do, then it helps us deal with the people who aren't being nice to us and help us, you know, make the boundaries. And if we talk about energy, you know, the more you love yourself, you're raising your energy higher. And those people just aren't even going to be around.
Yeah, it's so true. It is so true. That's been happening since I've been practicing self-love.
Yeah.
It's just like disappear. The bullies disappeared.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's why they say the world you see is a reflection of who you are. I mean, the more you are loving, and that starts with loving of yourself, then the more of a loving surrounding world you'll see. And I know we're saying that, you just mentioned before that, you know, war is happening. But what we have to do, I think, is be the bright lights that we are, and that affects the people around us, and that's going to spread. I mean, look at what you're doing. You are causing something to spread, love and light, because of what you're doing.
Yeah, it is so exciting. It is so exciting. You know, this started years ago when I got pregnant of my 9-year-old daughter. I was so confused. What can I do? I am pregnant. I cannot work. That was my idea. So the person told me, why don't you interview the people experts in pregnancy? And I swear to you, I found the idea fantastic. I sent an email saying, I'm just a pregnant woman. I know nothing about pregnancy and medicine. Can I interview you? And I created a summit.
Yeah.
So that happened 9 years ago. And that proved to me that people are people and people are loving. And there is a lot of compassion.
Right. Right. You know, in all my years of organizational development work, I did so much with conflict, and people who are fighting come together, a team, maybe they haven't been speaking to each other, and initially nobody wants to talk, nobody wants to open up, and then somebody is brave enough to share something, and and that helps other people understand them better. And the whole, you can feel the feeling in the room changes as people slowly begin to open up. And I think that's part of it, is those women who were mean to you were either jealous or afraid, or, you know, so finding ways, forums to get together and talk and get to know each other opens up ways to love each other better.
Absolutely. And it's the fact of daring, take action, you take action. That one person who dare to speak up,
Right.
dare to say, I don't understand, I'm sad, I'm angry, dare to just be. Yeah.
That takes enormous courage, particularly in a group that's been fighting, but it's Brene Brown's work about allowing yourself to be vulnerable, that really didn't feel good to me, and I needed to tell you that, and can we talk about it, and it can open up all kinds of doors of conversation.
Yeah. Oh, you make me think of my husband today. My poor husband has his mother in the hospital, and I wanted to buy a lamp this morning. So I asked him, "Do you like this lamp?" He was furious.
Oh,
And then I thought, "Oh my God, is it my fault? What did I do? Are you angry at me? It's too expensive. It's not your style." And then I kindly asked him, "You changed your behavior from the moment I asked you about the lamp." And then the self-awareness started. Well, I'm actually worried about my mother, which made all the sense. And this it stopped being, for me, the lesson was to stop being in the center, thinking that his reaction is because of me.
right.
And this is important for the historical moment that we're living. We don't know how the other person is feeling.
Right. And we don't know what they've got going on with their mother or father or children, or yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful. So beautiful leadership in this and the heroine's journey. So powerful. So powerful. So as you know, 15 years knowing you, I'm so delighted to talk to you forever, for the rest of my life. We need to start closing. Susanna, you are the expert on the heroine's journey. You run this school for heroines. I would love you to use your intuition and imagine all the heroines on the other side of the, in the audience, the other side of the screen. What is that nugget that they must listen? They must get into your heart before we say goodbye.
Believe that what you're receiving, even if it's a gentle nudge, the thing that you're receiving that makes you feel that, okay, maybe I need to do this. As much as you might be resisting it, thinking, I can't, what will happen? Who am I to do that? It is coming to you for a reason, because you're the one person that's going to be able to translate that through you into your work and into the world, and the world needs it. Don't judge it. Just let it come in. Don't let it be your chair that you're dragging. And sometimes maybe it'll take you longer than you want to make it a reality, but pay attention to it. You are more than you think you are. And you are a heroine, and you are on this transformative journey, and it's about getting the calls and listening to them. And I know that you're going to listen and do it and really help all of us in that process.
Oh, how beautiful. Oh, how beautiful, how beautiful. Definitely what you said spoke to me. I think we're all in this process of transformation, and we are all called to be more authentic, more real,
Right.
We were in a kind of leveling up of authenticity and courage.
Well,
Oh,
here you
Susanna,
are. You're doing
thank
it.
you so
So,
much.
I mean, you're the perfect example. Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you for
Thank you so
honoring
much.
the sacred feminine and for gathering us all with you. So just, it's been fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, Susanna, I'm so happy. Ladies, I am so happy with how things are going and having Susanna here. Thank you. We continue in the conference and well, thank you.
Wow, ladies, how lovely to remember this conversation with my dear Susanna, to have you here listening again. Your words get to my heart, and I see in the chat how women are so happy to listen to you as well. I'm really, really delighted to have you here, Susanna, to add to this conversation. Ladies, we are going to welcome another now has become dear friend. I met her through this process. I met her through her books. This is our dear Veronica Goodchild. Susanna is inviting us to listen to our call. And there is a call that we are all being invited right now. But it's so subtle that we don't even notice. And this subtlety and this brightness and this shyness is precisely what Veronica is going to talk about right now with you. So take a deep breath in and open your mind and your heart to this beautiful conversation, because she has something so delicious and so valuable for you guys, ladies. So
Hello, my dear ladies. Here is Blanca Vergara with another edition of the Wounds to Wings Summit. I am so delighted to introduce to you a dear lady. She is, oh, you're going to fall in love with her after you talk to listen to her. She's Veronica Goodchild. She is here in Europe, in the south of France. She is a PhD. She's a professor emerita at Pacifica Graduate Institute. She was educated in London and in the US. She's a teacher, Jungian psychotherapist, and an author. Led by dreams, she has explored sacred sites in England, France, Greece, Peru, and Egypt. Walking one of the Camino paths in France inspired her to create her own pilgrimage journeys to develop a more conscious relationship with our earth. Together, the mystic and the archetypal stories that underlie many shrines, temples, oracle sites. These journeys have included the Magdalene mysteries in France, the bee priestess oracular tradition in Crete, and mainland Greece, and the Grail and Celtic legends in the UK. A recent trip to Egypt has rekindled an abiding interest in our galactic and cosmic origins. Veronica is the author of Songlines of the Soul, Pathways to a New Vision for a New Century, and Eros and Chaos, the Sacred Mysteries and Dark Shadows of Love. And Veronica lives in the south of France.
I interrupt this transmission because I realized that there was a problem with this video in the middle, and I have it solved, but I need to change it. I'm sorry for this mistake. I'm going to give you the right video right now. stillness of being. I can make a mistake sometimes. Yes. Okay. Okay. My apologies, ladies. My apologies, Veronica. I want to do the right version.
We were preparing via email this conversation, and you were inspired to talk about the connection to the stars. And with all this traveling, this begs the question, how did you become interested in this connection to the stars? And when we're talking about the divine feminine, what's behind this?
Well, I was also I was reading over again when I started thinking about what I wanted to say today. And you were talking about also in relationship to the divine feminine, you were talking about our sacred past. And there's nothing like Egypt for a deep dive into our ancient past. And, you know, I think always as a child, I had this fascination with the night sky. And I very early on in my childhood, when I was about 5 or 6, I had a deep experience that has stayed with me my entire life. And in some ways, I think it's the blueprint of my life. And it was when I was in the garden of my family home, and suddenly everything became very quiet. And it was as if all the noises of this world just kind of disappeared. And I saw in my vision that everything was covered in gold. Everything was covered in gold light, a bit like your beautiful wall behind you there. And in that moment, and in such moments, when the other world breaks through, you don't know if they last 2 seconds or 2 hours. But in that moment, I knew that I came from that light, and I knew that one day I would return to it. And when I was thinking about today, I was thinking, well, now that just happened so early on, this idea that we come from the stars and that one day we'll return to the stars, or maybe we return to the stars in the lifetime while we're alive. But so I think this has been very deeply in my cells, in my cellular memory, maybe. Yeah, that's, I think, where it started. So, you know, I've reflected a lot on that experience since. You know, what was that gold light? Was it the sunlight? No, yes, no. But maybe it was an inner sun, you know, maybe it was a mystical sun, a sun that is not a sun too. So that's very much about Egypt as well.
That I find fascinating. And how do you connect this with the divine feminine? What is your, it is like the mother that we are coming from this light, or how do you experience it?
Well, I think that because the Egyptians were stargazers, they were astronomers, they loved the stars and watching the night sky. And they knew that we were intimately connected with the whole galaxy. And over the temple ceilings in Egypt, you invariably see golden stars coming out of a blue beyond. And one of the major sky goddesses in Egypt is Nut, or Nut. And her whole body is a body of stars. And the sun itself, our sun, has a whole mythology about it. It's born each day, it raises to its zenith, and then it starts into its descent to the below, to the night, to the underworld, and then it renews itself each dawn. And when you're in Egypt and you have this blazing sun, you know, I was out in Abydos and there was no rain in the 7 weeks I was there, and they never have rain. And all you have is this sun going around, this star. But it is the Great Mother. It is the Great Mother goddess that gives birth to the stars. And in this mythology about the stars, you see how nature, for the Egyptians, a bit like the Celts, they read everything through nature. But then they added the visionary, mythical imagination to it. And so that's where the stories about the stars, the stories about our connection with star systems, with the sun, with the mythology of rising and then, you know, returning. These are very, very important mythological images that are connected to many of the goddesses of the ancient world, who were goddesses of the sky, of the earth, of the underworld. And that was when, you know, life was still a unified whole. It was seen as a whole. And this, of course, is what we've lost grievously.
Yeah.
And a part of that has been the loss of the feminine, the loss of nature, and our connection to nature, and as much to nature as to the galaxy. And this was all originally about the Great Mother.
Beautiful. It is being the creator and the creation being one.
Exactly.
No separation.
Exactly. Yes, and there's quite a lot I'd like to say about that, because I feel we're at a time where, you know, the recovery of the divine feminine is so much part of a larger story about our reconnection to nature and to the stars, because of course the feminine was connected with the earth. The earth was matter. Woman was connected with matter. And certainly in the Judeo-Christian tradition, West, other cultures as well, this is what we have become split off from, our own natures and nature outside and beyond nature to the stars. And so to me, this in a very profound way has to do with the recovery of the divine feminine.
Yes, so beautiful. Years ago, I had a terrible car accident in Brazil. We were driving through the mountains, and I could see the machinery breaking the mountains, breaking the mountains, breaking the mountains. And with my Aztec background, I was crying, and I still remember, and I cried how we were raping the earth. It was raining and all the mud started going down. And you know why we almost died? Is because we slid in that mud. We slid in that mud, and we almost ended up in going down the mountain. And for me, it was so vivid because, of course, we almost died. It's a big deal. We almost died into being absorbed part of nature. Of what you were saying, of how we separated we are from this divine Mother Earth. And it's just like making it relevant for where we are today. And this is my question, or what I would love you to elaborate. What are the implications of this, and what is the relevance for our very modern way of living?
Yes, well, this is why, particularly in Jungian psychology, which is very much my background, we learn so much by going beyond the sort of history we were taught at school to the myths, to the eternal stories that, you know, they're once upon a time stories. They're stories that were written or for a long time, of course, oral in different cultures, but they tell the story of the universal condition. And, just to think about Egypt, I mean, the major myth of Egypt, for example, is the Isis and Osiris myth. And that's a very profound story about the human condition relating. I'm just thinking to your terrible car accident and your near-death experience, in a way, that for Isis, Osiris' brother was jealous of him and murdered him. And Isis, who says she fell in love with her brother, of course, in Egypt, they all marry their brothers and their sisters and their mothers and daughters and things. And she loved Osiris from the womb. They were twins. But when he was murdered, her grief and her loss and the death of her beloved set her out on a search, and she went in search of him. And the story is all about, how she found him and how, because he was murdered again by his jealous brother almost a second time, and his body was split up into different pieces and buried in different areas. But she went on a great search to reassemble the broken parts. And out of that, a new birth came. And I think that, you can hear in the words how much many of our stories are about, they begin often in this sense of loss or near death or depression or grief. And the journey that one can then take is to find all these lost parts, all these, what's behind both our personal grief, but beyond that, because when you get into your personal grief, you tend to go deeper into grief on other levels. And I think what you're talking about with the divine feminine and in your experience is that you were responding to the grief of mountains being stripped for whatever, mining or resources or whatever. And so you feel in your body these different levels of loss. And I think that when you can respond to that by not only working on your personal issues, but by doing what you're doing with this creative forum you're putting together, to bring back the loss of the goddess, the loss of nature, the loss of the sacred feminine on many, many different levels. And this is what we're faced with today. This is what we're all, at some level, when you begin to wake up to not only your personal issues, but what's going on in the world and what's going on, in terms of our continuing raping of the earth for resources and this sort of thing, which is contributing to climate change and climate issues. This is all related to the feminine. So yeah, that story is about bringing the pieces back together and then deciding, so where, as you said, where do we go from here?
I love that. I love that. And come to mind the other stories, in the Aztec cosmology, the moon is the feminine, and in the story Soul Broken, and all the pieces are put together. And then I think of the skeleton woman of Clarissa Pinkolas test, that's bringing together the pieces. And this is what we're doing in these conversations, bringing together all these pieces.
Yes. It's interesting too that you mentioned, so you see how these deep universal patterns can manifest in different myths and cultures across the world with different stories, but the underlying issues and feelings and what it gives rise to are really the same, And so that's a beautiful example of that, actually. Yeah. It's interesting what you said about that, because in Egypt, the god that, particularly in relation to the stars, that I love to think about is Thoth, because Thoth, who has the ibis beak, he is the one who wonders about the cosmic mysteries, but he's also a moon god. He's considered a moon god, which I find really, really interesting. Because Nut is a sky goddess, but Geb is the earth god. And so you have this reversal in a way. And but Thoth, he has these deep thoughts and wonders about how the universe and the stars work and all of this, and astrology and astronomy. But his wife, Shishat, is the one who has a 7-pointed star on her head. And she is the one that takes the deep knowledge of Thoth and puts it into a form. She's the writer. So she puts it into a form that can be disseminated so that other people can learn about it. So I love this connection of, in a sense, divine masculine and feminine working together to create something that can become available, you know, for many people. And so that union of gathering the pieces of the lost feminine in oneself and redeeming the masculine side too, bringing these together to give birth to something new, I think is also at the heart of what you're saying. Because when you put together a conference, an online conference, you know, this takes work. This is bringing your vision in harmony with something, with work that you want to put out there and make available for others. So it's a beautiful thing that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how the consciousness is rising, and that we are opening our minds to this profound knowledge that somehow has been there forever, but now we have the open heart to listen.
Yes, I think that's right. It has been there forever. That's right. But it's been obscured. It got lost. It's been in the underworld. They say that this time is the Kali Yuga time, the time when the consciousness is at the bottom of the barrel. It's as if, I think we can look around the world and see a whole sort of death process going on. But at the same time, there are, out of that ending of the Piscean age that we've been in, there is a beautiful movement toward bringing back this ancient knowledge and connecting it with, you know, with quantum physics, with technology in a benign way, and all these sorts of things. So yeah, this is a death rebirth moment, and bringing back the ancient knowledge of the goddesses and the stars, because you know, in Abydos, the temple there was built as a healing temple, and it has 7 chapels to the major gods and goddesses of Egypt. And it is thought that the 7 chapels relate to the 7 sisters, the Pleiadian star system, which is sometimes called the 7 sisters. At the same time, each chapel is attuned to a different vibration. And so each chapel is also mirroring the different 7 major chakras of the body. And so it's this connection all the time between inner and outer, between above and below, between our inner suns as much as our outer inner suns and moons, as much as our outer suns and moons. So again, it's a vision of a unified world. You know, in Egypt, the Milky Way is a reflection of the Nile and the river, which is the major river in Egypt, because every year it produces the water for the country, for the crops, and for everyone. And you know, so there's this constant mirror between above and below, between masculine and feminine all the time. And I like that very much, because they learn from nature, they see nature, and they see how it's mirrored in an individual life as much as an age, you know. So yeah, it's a beautiful image of wholeness, really, for me. And I think this is what we're striving for now, to bring the broken parts back into a whole within ourselves and within culture.
How exhilarating. It's really exhilarating to think that we are alive in this moment and we are finding those pieces. And I love so much to read where you have been walking in England, in France, in Egypt, and that all that knowledge is like all these little pieces. And talking to you, other women will get to know about it, and it's just the ripple effects of this.
Yes, I think that that is the hope, and the hope is too, I think that any one tiny thing that you might say might be a spark, you know, might be a spark for something, for some reflection, some memory, some, and when I was teaching, I always used to love that, because you never know how your experience and what you say falls, you know, falls with patients or students or a situation like this. And so, yeah, that is the hope, that some piece might be a door opener. That is always my hope. And I that's what I loved about doing the first of all, doing my own pilgrimages, walking solo, as I did across one of those paths in France, from Le Puy-en-Velay down to the southwest corner, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, because what happened on that solo walk, when I would get up every morning and walk about anywhere between 20 and 30 kilometers, and then do it again, you know, and then do it again, what happens is your mind starts to break down, you know, your ego mind starts to break down. And what happened for me is that I developed this kind of felt sense. It wasn't just a walk in nature. What I came to feel was that I was contacting the spirit of nature and the soul of nature. And that was a life changer for me, when I experienced the earth, not just knowing about it intellectually, but I experienced the earth as a sentient being who, over the time and period of my walk, that was over 2 years. I didn't do that long walk in one go. I did it in 2 years, but over the time of that long walking, where I purposefully did it by myself, so I wouldn't get distracted with talk or be brought up to my ordinary local consciousness, ego consciousness every day. I didn't want that. I wanted to sink down, and that's what happened. And because I had already done some of the journeys to Peru and to Egypt the first time, to Greece, and France also, some of these places I've visited several times, what I felt at the sacred sites was that these were portal areas that were particularly permeable to the soul of the earth, and from, you know, the energy of the stars. And, you know, and since that time, of course, with my reading and research about it, they were built specifically for that. It's like the crop circles in England. They tend to appear in areas that are known, you know, from ancient times as Neolithic sites or stone circles or, you know, other kinds of temple structures. And, you know, the crop circles they're the spirit of the earth manifesting themselves together with the Star Nation people, as far as that is my current view of it. Because here you have these amazing geometric, and I work with a crop circle group, so I know from the sacred geometers in that group, I'm not one, but I know from them how precise the geometry of these formations are. And when you think of geometry as the sort of universal language of the cosmos, because geometry is true whether you believe it or not, it's a given, it's already there. We've discovered it, but it was already there. And so when you think of that eternal realm intersecting with nature, with earth, with crops that come and go every year, you already have a kind of mythic pattern of the immanence of the divine, of how spirit and matter are intimately connected, and how the spirit of the earth herself participates through the grain, through the crops, with this imprint, as it were, from, I'll say above. That may not be true literally, but that's what I'll say. And then you have a symbol that everyone can see, because you can look at them on internet sites, even if you don't go and visit them. But here again is another, and they're like temple structures. They don't last because they come and go each year, but they're, again, for me, as with UFO phenomena, they are signatures of a world that is trying to change. And these to me are like symbols or myths of any kind, that it behooves us to pay attention to them and to really allow ourselves to reflect, not only on where do they come from or how are they made, but what might they mean for us. And so again, it's this above and below connection, this invitation to a unified world. And the crop circles themselves are, for me, very much about the manifestation of the divine feminine, because they're nature. And they have vibrations. They incorporate vibrations that, if you enter them, and over the years I have a number of times, can change you, you know. So yeah, this is all part of the recovery of the divine feminine for me, for sure.
It's so powerful. So oh God, I could go so many directions. You mentioned that you had something to show us, an image, or is that still relevant, or is
Oh, it was I have a couple of pictures of that I took this last time in Egypt of from the Temple of Dendera. Beautiful temple, of the goddess Nut and her stars, her star body.
so you have this realization of this memory of how important is that we're coming from the stars.
Yes.
Why is this so relevant? What is particularly relevant right now?
Well, you know,
time.
my educational academic background and my personal interests allows me to look at stars from many different points of view. And this is also something that I find fascinating, because there are many ways of looking at stars, obviously. So for example, just very briefly, you can think of stars as symbols, right? They're symbols in astrology, there are symbols of the zodiac, they're in tarot cards, etc. And they can represent, you know, like the soul or the eternal highest value or something like that, or our longing for that. Stars can express that longing. They navigate, you know, they're used for navigation. And, you know, the stars in our dreams also guide us. And I have a dream that I'd like to share maybe a bit later on that has exactly to do with that. And the stars.
If you want to do that now? If you want to do that now?
I could, yeah. But just let me finish just to say, because about the feminine too, the stars are very much connected to the goddesses. So, for example, you know, the star is the symbol of Venus and other goddesses as the morning and evening star. Venus is the morning and evening star. Isis is the queen of heaven, you know, wears a crown of stars, and many of the queens of heaven, like the Virgin Mary and so on, have this halo of stars around them. And, you know, we've already talked about Nut, but Isis, for example, is also connected with Sirius. And the pharaoh, in his resurrection rites and rituals, the aim of those, which was a sort of initiation in the Great Pyramid, this is what the pyramids were for, they were initiation chambers. The initiation would have to do with connecting with his star, with his eternal star, so that he would know that he was part of the cosmos, a cosmic being, and then he could come back and rule with that knowledge in his awareness. And I think this is part of why stars are so important, because connection with stars can change our attitude about the world and how we live in it. Anyway, stars, as I say, can come in our dreams. Now, this dream I had actually at the end of January, it was when I was really thinking about, because one day I sat down and I said, okay, now what do I really want to say? Because I actually started a whole thing on the divine feminine. And then I thought, well, no, I think Anne will probably talk much more coherently about that. So I won't do that. But then I just said, what I want to talk about. And I said, the voice came in, talk about the stars. And then very shortly after that, I had a dream in which I was with this young girl. I think it was my daughter when she was young. And we were upstairs in a building up on the, well, the first floor if you're European and English, but the second floor if you're American. And we were just sort of looking out at the evening sky. And then I look down and I see all the people on the ground floor level either leaning out of their windows or standing in the street, and they were all looking up to a different part of the sky. And so I follow their gaze to see where they're looking. And as I look up, I see the night sky as I've never seen it before. All the stars seemed incredibly sparkly, and they seemed so close. And I could actually see the Pleiades star system and the major 7, I think it's actually 9, but the major 7 stars in that cluster were just like diamonds. They were so close, I could see them, and they were so exquisitely beautiful. And then my gaze went from that, I mean, I was in a state of complete wonder, and then it moved slightly to the left, and I saw this UFO. It was shaped like a boomerang, actually, which is a very odd shape. I've never seen that shape really as a UFO shape, but it had different size lights coming off it. It was just beautiful to look at. And as you looked at it, it was coming apart from a larger mother ship, as it were, and it just glided slowly off into the night sky. It just was silent as anything. It just glided off. And then again, my gaze went slightly to the left again, and a cloud dispersed, and there was this most beautiful UFO ship that looked like a huge building with lights coming out of it, just sort of flashing and beaming out, but in a kind of gentle way. And it was just wondrous and exquisite to look at the whole thing, just a complete marvel. But the knowing in the dream, I knew in the dream that the advanced galactic beings were an undeniable reality. That was just true in the dream world. And it was a sort of confirmation that these other civilizations that have visited the earth since time immemorial, there's so much in the historical record about this and in different cultures, particularly indigenous cultures that have carried this knowledge, because it's part of their teachings. It's part of, when I worked with shamans, the star connection was always incredibly important, because the wisdom came from the stars, the knowledge came from the stars. They were the ancestors. They were the ones that some of the shamanic practitioners could travel to gain the knowledge and this sort of thing. And it was just a confirmation that here are other civilizations that just behind the veil are all around. There are higher frequency beings here to help us with the changes that we're going through. I heard two speakers recently speak about this too. One was a medical doctor, John Ryan. Another was a theoretical physicist, Adam Apollo, and they were both talking on Sacred Planet, Jocelyn Mercado's Sacred Planet, Into the Mythica, which was just in earlier in January. And they were saying from their research how clear it seems to be, and from personal memories that people have of being connected to other civilizations, not of this earth, that they know that they've had incarnations in on other planetary systems, that these beings are here because they've already gone through the process that we are in the middle of right now, this initiation into the redemption of the feminine and the recovery of our place in the galaxy and in the universe, and that they've already moved from a sort of planetary civilization to one that can travel. And all our physics now, physics are going to probably, I don't know whether in my lifetime, but certainly in younger people's lifetime, is going to show that we can use gravity in a different way. We're already going to the stars. I mean, so that they're here really not to interfere, but to support this deep and profound initiation process that the Earth is going through at the moment.
This is
So
so
that's
hopeful.
where the stars can appear in dreams.
This is so hopeful.
Very hopeful, very
So
hopeful.
hopeful. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it makes sense if we really bring back the feminine, the whole consciousness of the planet, the whole consciousness of humanity has to rise. And then this I almost find it egoistic, this ego idea that we're alone in the universe. It's just,
It's silly, isn't it?
it's just so, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
With so much space. And indeed, me with my Aztec background, this was the conversation. Quetzalcoatl was a being from other place, who went in different incarnations as Kukulkan, as Amaru, every places. The ancient cultures knew this.
Yeah.
This is so hopeful.
It's so hopeful because we need, I mean, look at our world. We have all this knowledge and look at our world. It's just terrible. So we need a much vaster, comprehensive expansion of consciousness and a vision about who we are, where we come from, where we're going. The old order is simply not holding. It's not holding because it's so corrupt and split. That's why it's not working anymore. And COVID, as I think we mentioned, is maybe before we spoke, but this is a wake-up call that, you know, that even through COVID, we can see how interrelated we all are. But we as a civilization are completely out of touch with reality, as far as I'm concerned at this point. But once you realize that the world is unified and a one world, once you know that, not just as a theory, but because you've experienced it, like a dream is an experience. And in that dream, that was my experience. And when I walked those Camino paths, that was my experience. I am absolutely certain that not only the Earth, but the galaxy is a sentient body, and we are like drops of water on a vast ocean that we cannot even imagine. And even to take in some of that as an experience and not just an idea is to live differently, because you're no longer an isolated little pathetic being sitting in your apartment. You are non-locally connected to everything. And so that gives hope, as you say. And this will restore our connection to the sacred. This will restore our value system. And we can then use knowledge with wisdom instead of using it for nefarious ends.
Knowledge with wisdom. Of course, it's logical, it's obvious that the listeners are in different spiritual stages in their own spiritual journey.
Yes.
And it's a very difficult question to give an advice, but for everybody. But if you may, how can we help the turning tide of bringing this divine feminine back with our little grain of sand in our lives? What would you say?
Well, I would say, first of all, that's an excellent question, because many people feel completely overwhelmed by what's going on at the moment. And I read an article in the New York Times that a friend sent me this morning, from yesterday, I think, or maybe Sunday, I'm not quite sure, about how the climate crisis is really causing tremendous psychological distress. So I think you start where you are. And, you know, it's often in every tradition cross-culturally that I've read and learned about, it is often something falling apart in your own life that opens the door. It could be a depression, it could be a realization, it could be an illness, it could be a relationship loss, it could be the death of a loved one, it could be loss of job, it could be anything that stops you in your tracks and makes you think, oh my God, I need now to really take this seriously. So I would say that's always the place to start. Or it might be a numinous experience of some kind that you have no idea and you want to find out more about it. It could be anything really. An experience in nature, a dream, something will wake you up. And that is always the starting point. And then from there, you can begin a journey. I would say that a journey when you wake up in that way is one that should never be taken alone. You need an other to reflect back to you, to relate with you as you're going through something like that. But if you can let the door open and you can find, be it therapist, be it coach, be it someone who will take your experience seriously, be it shaman, I've worked with shamans, also extremely helpful. Counselors of one kind or another. I do think it's important that one doesn't try to do this alone, because in communion with another who understands what, not your experience, but what you're going through, is enormously helpful and therapeutic to begin with. And then from that doorway opening, if you can step into it, then a whole world opens. Then you can be open to your dreams. Then you can be open to reading mythology. Then you can be open to a whole host of ways of re-educating yourself. Or you can join groups and find support that way. But your life will change. But to me, it's about taking your experience seriously. That's the starting point. And knowing, as others have known before you, that you are not alone, either personally or interpersonally or planetarily or galactically. And then it becomes more of an adventure, which is not to say that it isn't a process where you might go down into a lot of pain and suffering. But that is not always a bad thing, because depression, for example, is not pathology. It's not that there's something wrong with you, it's there's something right with you, that you're feeling, you're having an appropriate feeling for a situation that you're in. And then you can start to use the imagination to allow you to enter these deep waters and to find other people and other ways that you can begin to this search to find out who you really are and why are you really here. I mean, these in the end are the questions that we ask ourselves. And because this is what will give your life meaning. Will give your life a meaning that maybe there was no other way to get there except through what's happening to you right now. And that may be the interest you have in coming onto a program like this as a viewer. Certainly for me as a presenter, it's so I can share knowledge of, now I'm 70, of a fairly long life. And certainly since my teenage years have been involved in it. So, you know, you learn a few things along the way. And yeah, I mean, life is also an adventure, and there are difficult deaths, but there are also rebirths that come out of the effort and work that you put in to discover and rediscover who you really are. Yeah.
Oh, this is so beautiful. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love this idea of asking for help, because it's not about giving up, it's refusing to give up. Please do ask for help, and help helps really. It's in community that we heal. Absolutely. Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for those words.
So
to start rounding up our conversation.
Yes, we must.
I would like to ask you to call into your intuition on what we need to tell the ladies at home that will drive it all home.
The ladies at home, meaning the viewers?
The listeners.
The listeners. Well, you know what? The voice of a poet comes into my mind, and I'm not even sure which poet it is, which is a terrible thing to say. And props, you probably know, but it's some woman, I believe, who said, "What are you going to do with this one wild, wonderful life?" Something like that. That's what came into my heart when you asked that question.
Oh, so beautiful. So beautiful. So you have the power. You have the power. Just ask that question and just answer it with your life.
Yeah. And you're right about the power, by the way. You do. Every person has the power in themselves to change. And life can become more magical and more deep and more meaningful than you can possibly imagine once you start that journey.
Veronica, oh God, the pity of time. Thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate the conversation. I hope this is the first one of many. And thank you everybody for being here with us.
So ladies, wow, what a conversation. I totally love you, Veronica. I am so happy our paths crossed. Since I knew that we have a little bit of time, I asked Veronica if she could jump in to answer a question. And Ardia Shili, she typed a question in the chat. So Veronica, thank you very much for saying yes to that interview and now for this question. What Shili is asking is, we need to recover ancient wisdom and stories, but also need new stories. What is new in the old stories about sacred feminine? Thank you, Veronica. Let me see. Now you must be able to unmute.
Did that unmute? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. What was the question?
Well, I felt that I didn't thank you enough. Thank you so much for.
Oh, you did. You did. No worries about that. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for jumping in now, just last minute. So the question is, we need to recover ancient wisdom and stories, but also need new stories. What is new in the old stories about sacred feminine?
Well, that's really interesting. What's new? I wonder, part of me is going, what's behind that question? Because maybe there's wisdom in the question that I'm not tapping into. It's always good to, first of all, wonder where questions come from too. You know, who is asking the question? So I think for me, having, you know, as a Jungian psychotherapist and professor for so many decades, I think I can only answer that in relationship to my own experience. I mean, you know, I studied a lot of the Greek myths and other cross-cultural symbolism systems, and I always learned so much that was from the old stories that could be applied to my life, if not mythologically, at least psychologically, and that's what Jungian psychology is all about. But in recent years, and particularly since feeling called really to walk the Camino, because I was feeling increasingly sorrowful and really sad about the state of the earth, and this was 2013, I did the first walk. And the fact that, you know, and even now, there isn't enough initiatives on climate change being really, you know, in political systems being enacted. And so for me, because the earth is so related to the feminine, Gaia is a feminine goddess. And because of climate change, and because we've been through the rise of Christianity and all of that, Orthodox Christianity, we've been so cut off from our own instincts, our own sexuality, our own nature. Simultaneously, nature could be made use of, you know, and you gave your wonderful example of seeing the rape of the mountainside, which literally almost killed you. And so that's a great metaphor for the dangerous situation we're in. And so for me, what's new is not really new, but what's new is really the need to address the earth and to develop a relationship with earth, a conscious relationship with the earth, and develop it like any other relationship. Because what I found walking in the end, when I was doing those really long walks and long days of walking one after the other, what in addition to that felt sense that I had, that I described, what I really felt was that the earth was communicating love back to me as I was trying to express an intention to walk in a meditative way. And that was the thing that really got my attention, that she doesn't only want to be fretted over in terms of our anxiety about climate change, but my own feeling is, which is why I started doing my own pilgrimages, which COVID cut short, unfortunately, at least to the present moment, but was fostering this connection with the earth under our feet. And then once I started really moving much more in that direction, it moved out also to the connection with the stars for all the reasons I tried to say something about today. So that for me is what is new. I suppose, but I'm not sure if that answers the question of the person who asked it.
I don't know if that answers the question for she, but that answers the question for me, because that way you have a constant renewal of the relationship, a constant renewal of what the feminine means. It's like every step you take, every time a little leaf falls or is born, every grape that you eat is a renewal on the relationship. I really love your answer. It means a lot to me. Maybe Shili wants to comment.
Yes, please. I haven't, but no, I think that's it. And because once you feel the sentience, the consciousness, the soul, the spirit of the earth herself, you can't go on treating it mindlessly. You can't go on treating it as if it doesn't matter how, as you're saying, how you walk on her. You know, on the pilgrimage paths, there'd be people who were walking to do as many kilometers as they possibly could during the day. And I was fascinated by that, because I thought, well, are you actually seeing what you're passing through, you know? Because for me, I got so attuned to the breezes going through trees or the atmospheres in forests. I mean, the range of consciousness in tiny, tiny flowers, you know, the majesty and the beauty of creation. I mean, we are a jewel in the cosmos, and we should be treating both ourselves as women, because certainly thousands of years of the repression and oppression of women and women's voices, and, you know, all of that is terribly, terribly important. But beyond that, we're dependent on the earth. And without an earth, the earth will go on, but we may not. So, yeah. And the shamans and indigenous cultures have been teaching this since the beginning of time. This is what we need to return to, not as a kind of regression, but taking in all the best of what we have learned up to now, and integrating it with a recovery of this ancient wisdom.
I find so integral and so good your question that I almost don't dare to ask the next one, because it just is somehow already answered, but maybe you can find a nuance. When we had our conversation, Putin and the Ukraine were not on the news, and then they became the dominant factor. Somehow I feel that you have answered that. What is our role personally and as women in this world of I call it black and white and aggression and polarization. I really would love if you can give us some, I don't know, your words on what is our role.
Well, you know, things happen on many scales and on many levels. I think from one point of view, Putin's invasion, unlawful, illegal invasion into the Ukraine, for me on one level is the last stand of a patriarchal consciousness that is trying to assert its authoritarian power over, not empowerment from within, but power over another group. And it's horrific. There's absolutely no two ways about it when you look at the suffering of the Ukrainian people, many of whom, of course, have become refugees. It's just unthinkable in this time that anything like that would happen. On the other side, it has rallied tremendous reaction across the world. You know, people are pulling oil, people are trying to get, you know, so that there is a response that I think is walking a very fine line, because certainly we don't want to get engaged in a broader war. But I think that the demonstrations, I mean, there is a group, it's as if there's a group swell of a feeling of we are not going to take this kind of aggression. And so that is bringing together people, some of whom with tremendous courage, because certainly in Russia, and it's so against the law to say anything that you think, and now they're being threatened with 15 years in jail or whatever. It's just unthinkable. But I think we do what we can. I think prayer is important. I mean, I pray on a daily basis that it won't, I don't know, that the wisdom somehow of the cosmos will come in and guide leaders to have the appropriate and least harmful response. But, it's some idea of imposing willfully something that other people don't want. And this is, in a sense, why we're trying to move out of patriarchy, because it is so destructive to people and to the soul of who we are. So let's just pray and hope and just, I mean, we, outside our grocery shops, you have people collecting goods, and we try to give what we can and things like that. And you feel like you're really doing nothing. But any gesture, I think, taken with your heart is an important one to make. Just do what you can, what you feel called to do, Yeah.
I love your answer, do what you can, because the enormity of this makes us feel helpless, but we can do something. A prayer is something. We should not forget about the power of where we are. Let me see if there was another question. I think there are lots of comments, and everybody liked very much your talk. And I was already blown away when I spoke to you, and now when listening to it, it became even more relevant. Maybe the question could be to ask you, now that you listened to your own talk and you felt that we mentioned there, are you inspired to say, this is this nugget that I would like to put more my accent on?
Well, my eye caught, I think it's Faye Blake, is that right? And she mentions Ceres, the goddess of grain. And my eye caught that, I suppose, in relation to the crop circle phenomenon, or I don't know what it was in response to, but in my book, Songlines of the Soul, I have a whole chapter on crop circles. And one of the things I wrote about was the mythic dimensions. And one of the stories, mythological stories I told, was the Demeter, goddess of grain myth in that chapter. And because her daughter was also considered the corn maiden. And in Egypt, of course, there is this mystery of wheat, because it comes and it, like a life, like periods of life, it thrives and then it dies, or it's cut down and then it goes into the earth, and then it rises again. And the Demeter Persephone mysteries were really important. They lasted for thousands of years, and they were really important because with all the, the greater and the lesser mysteries and all of this, the ultimate purpose of the mysteries was to have a transcendental experience, a bit like nowadays we read about near-death experiences, where you would see beyond, so that you would know the truth about the reality, or the whole reality of life. And so the idea was that you would really have an experience of divinity, or that you participated in this larger mystery that didn't end at death, but you could be assured, as many people are afraid of death because we've cut death off from the rhythm of our lives, even symbolically, really, that we go through these movements all through life. I reckon we go through them every 10 years about, but in near-death experiences, people who were hard and fast materialist types have experiences that make them absolutely know that, you know, there is an eternal world that we participate in that manifests here, and that when we leave this plane, we will just go on to another adventure. That is true with almost all the near-death experience literature that I've read, and that's quite a lot. So, and I'm sure others of you have too. So, yeah, so this whole image of the Ceres and the corn goddess and the corn maiden and the wheat mystery is all about that. So let us hope that, you know, that this awful global situation at the moment is like just the death throes of the end of the Piscean era, and that even astrologically, apparently it will get better, but not probably until we approach 2024. But still, we must hold on to that as best we can and live each day just doing what your heart, doing what you love, that you're good at and you just love to do. And that is enough. Your presence here on this earth is enough. You are enough.
Veronica, I am so grateful for these last words. Thank you so much for giving us some extra of you. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. What a pleasure for me too. Thank you for asking me.
Veronica, I hope this is not the last time we work together. We need to create more because, as you said, it is, you know, maybe it's the next 2 years, then we change, we awaken, and then we have to start building a new reality that I cannot imagine how that could be. How could we live without hierarchies? How can we live without competition? How can we live without fighting? How is that? How does that work? How can we cooperate? How can we trust each other? We have to invent a new way of being.
Yeah, and on a pilgrimage path, you go one step at a time. So on the global path, I think it seems that it's that way. We go one step at a time.
Yeah. Oh, Veronica, thank you so much. Let's adjourn for now. We go away for 1 hour. Go and eat, go and have lunch, everybody. And the next session is a very important one because I am going to present to you a coach that concentrates in coaching men. And she is talking about the divine feminine while she coaches men. So this is a really fascinating conversation. And then we are going to close with a blast. I got to know an amazing healer, therapist, wise woman from Canada, who is also a musician. And she created this song that is called Wounds to Wings. It's the name of the summit. I didn't know that. And she agreed to sing this song with us for the closing. She's here with us. Eva, hello. She is going to be singing with us. She's going to show us her song, and you're going to learn more from that. So in 1 hour we get together, we listen to Anne van der Giessen. She's not Dutch, she's Australian. So you see, this conference is just so magical. There's the Mexican in the Netherlands and the Australian in the Netherlands is just crazy. So I'll see you in 1 hour. We're going to have Anne, going to have Eva, and have a lovely dinner And Veronica, thank you again for the conversation, the recorded and the impromptu one. Have a lovely dinner, everybody. Bye. Bye.